Hello class, so here we are, assessment. Okay, so an interesting chapter. There's a lot of things you need to understand about the assessment of ELLs, assessment of all students. The first thing will be to make a distinction between test and exam, assessment and evaluation. You're going to see states that are going to use these large scale test exams. They're going to call them assessments. Assessment is a system. Assessment is a system of evaluating students where we're going to collect different information at different points of time with different tools and instruments, so we get a holistic perception of how the student is performing, and thus we can make an evaluation of the student. Our large scale standardized assessments that we use in most states today, in Colorado, TCAP, CSAP, name it, whatever it is that we're doing now, those are exams. They're just exams. They're timed exams, usually pen and paper based, that give you an idea of what the student knows in a particular time, in a particular format, at a given time. You know, it's a discrete data point. For us to create a good evaluation of students, particularly important with ELLs because we know they underperform in written, sit-down, timed, pen and paper kind of tests, it is imperative that we have a good assessment system, different data collected throughout time longitudinally with different points in time and with different tools, so that we get a more holistic perception of the student. These can be very well done with formative assessments, also called classroom assessments. Some people call it informal, anecdotal assessments. I don't like those names because it takes power away from them. I would prefer to call them formative assessments, because the rule number one about assessments is that they need to inform you as much about your students as it needs to inform about your practice. That is what makes it an assessment system, is that it's not only going to tell you what you know about your students and what they're learning and if they're acquiring the knowledge that you expect them to acquire and at what level, but it's also going to tell you about how you're teaching. And if your teaching is going through correctly, and how you may need to calibrate your teaching, change your pedagogy, adapt your methodology to reach these students more effectively so they can start performing at the level that you expect them or want them to perform. Our concrete points in time are our standardized assessments that could be part of the general data on the student. It should. You know, it got a lot of positive things about them. It allows to draw comparisons across state districts and how if there's a teacher effect. But there's so many negative things about those about those exams. As I said, many students don't care about them, and they just sit down and they just complete them, and you don't get a real perception of what they do or know. The tests are usually generally culturally very loaded and culturally biased. They're normed with a population of monolingual students, probably. We're being more culturally sensitive in our psychometrics. Psychometricians are being more culturally trained, but still to this day, tests are developed by the norm, by the homogeneous mainstream establishment, the mainstream monolingual Anglo student. So your Latinos are underperforming. The language is a huge obstacle. You know your ELLs from the language chapter. You know your ELLs come to class with tons of different levels of English. The test has a particular kind of academic English that is expected of all students. So your students are not gonna provide at the level because they're not allowed to perform at the level of the English. So, formative assessments, classroom-based assessments, informal, anecdotal, I don't like the terms. Formative assessments, they tell you as much as your students as they tell you about yourself. These are ongoing. To me, assessment and instruction is one and the same. This is no classroom time, I'm going to teach to you, and then here we go, here's your test, repeat it after me. That's old school, you know that. There's nothing progressive about that type of education. To me, pedagogy involves teaching and assessment, one and the same. It's not the same, but it's ongoing and it happens simultaneously. I'll give you an example. When I teach Espanol, I do my lessons, I do my PowerPoints, I do my practice, you name it, traditional classroom if you want to. And then at the end of the unit, I can give them a quiz. Multiple choice, fill in the blank, vocabulary, audio comprehension. It has a variety of modes, so my students are not all exposed, they're not only forced to produce back to me in Espanol in a particular format, but they can, there's audio and listening comprehension, there is multiple choice, there is fill in the blanks, there's answer questions. There's a variety of format, yet pen and paper based. However, throughout my instruction, I embed assessment in a formative assessment. It informs me how I'm doing. And this can be done through collecting samples regularly. And to me, even it happens on time, simultaneously, more organically. I'm teaching, I get facial expressions from students. I get body language. If I'm like, hola, ¿cómo te llamas? And they give me the face right away. It clicks into me that the student is not understanding. I'm assessing the student's knowledge or understanding of the lesson. And then I need to modify my lesson to make myself more understood. Because I know English, I can start pulling from cognates and I can start pulling from things. And then I can ask, ¿cuál es tu nombre? And that sounds more like what is your name in English instead of ¿cómo te llamas? How do you call yourself? And then I model. You have to model. Yo soy José. ¿Y tú? ¿Cuál es tu nombre? And then students start responding. I just assess the student. And more importantly, I assess my practice. And I saw that what I was doing wasn't kicking into the student, so I modified it to make myself more understood. I assess, I calibrated my teaching, and I put it back into the student until I got the performance that I wanted them to obtain. Ongoing. Your classroom should be that. And then you have your collection of data. And please do more than just reading things. Not just collecting reading samples. Do observations, notes, informal notes. Formative assessment. Learn about them. There's so many you can embed in your instruction that can end up giving you a very global, holistic view of how your student is learning in your class. And more importantly, what activities are working, what lessons are you presenting that are kicking in really well with the students, which ones are not. And that's Assessment 101. It tells you much about your students and it tells you about yourself, about your practice. What does TCAP and SILA tell you about your teaching? Exactly. What do standardized assessment tell you about your teaching? Not much. They may tell you what a student knows in a discrete point in time. I'm okay with that. We do that with benchmarks assessments. We do 1, 2, 3 times a year. Then we do the big standardized assessment in March. I'm okay with that. But don't call it the word of God. Don't make it the only thing that the district and the state is going to make decisions on. Because what happens in the classroom is the big thing. Allowing our students to teach creatively, to collect data on their students that they know is meaningful and that informs them about their practice, how to become better teachers for the future, and how to get the students to get to the knowledge that they want them to get. That doesn't happen with the standardized assessments. Standardized assessments is a legal measurement, which is fine with me, but what is not fine with me is that we put so much weight on it. So assessments, so much. Please read about them and look forward to seeing you in the discussions. Adios.